warm welcome back. Well, it does seem as though we had a little technical gremlin in the system there, somebody trying to jack our lines, but nonetheless we're back up and running, and we still have Craig Aitchison from Old Mutual Corporate in studio with us discussing whether South Africa should be raising its retirement age. Now listen, just before we had that issue, you brought up quite an interesting point with regard to this particular issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we lost it, but the question was, you know, you'd used the word grant rather than pension, and you were telling us the difference between the two.
That's right. And, you know, we were saying that in countries like Australia and the UK, the system they have there is when you retire, government actually pays you a pension, and that's what you live on. And you would enjoy a certain lifestyle off that pension. In South Africa, we don't really have a state pension, but we do have a grant. The grant amount is much less, and it's really just there to help ward off poverty. Now, we have a lot of people on the grant system. I mean, this state old age grant, there's probably about 12 million people in this country who receive that. But it's a small amount. It's just over R1,000 a month. And so for South Africa, it's quite affordable. But when you look at Australia and the UK, they really are struggling to afford their way more generous pensions.
Well, Joe Hockey was mentioning the old age pension is costing them 40 billion Oz dollars. So that is a fair amount of money. But again, part of it was politicians making wonderful promises back in the 70s. You know, add 50 years on and life expectancy has gone to where it has, and certainly people are prepared to work longer, I know that for a fact. But the real question is, should you force them to work to 70?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I'm sure the Australian public will be voicing their opinion. I don't think they're too happy about it. But I think for governments like Australia and others who I believe will follow, they just don't have another option. And what's causing the pressure is the fact that those pensions, there's no savings behind them. They are pay as you go, meaning the tax that they raise from the taxpayers must go and pay those pensions. Today's tax pays today's pensions. And when you have a situation where more and more people are living longer, you just have so many more people receiving a pension compared to taxpayers, and that's really the squeeze. And so when you make the retirement age later, you kind of reduce that ratio a little bit and try and make it a bit more sustainable.
Again,
To the young guy, sorry.
What about the
Go ahead, Lindsay.
structure of the labour market? I'm going ahead because I'm going to be the person that, because of my healthy lifestyle, I'm going to be working till I'm 85. But on the other hand, the South African government will look at me and say, well, why is he working till he's 85 when we've got a youth unemployment rate of 45 to 50%? Let's put him out to pasture now. This is a serious problem because the structure of the labour market will change dramatically. And people like Liston Meintjes, for example, still a sprightly old bird that he is, with a good mind, with all his experience, is a much better proposition than some young greenie of 21. So it has huge political implications as well.
Yeah, well, Lindsay, I was going to say, don't look at day over 85. So well done.
Easy now.
But it's interesting you mentioned that. Certainly in Australia, the opposition to government raised that very point. They said, well, if you're making people stay longer in the workplace, they're not, you know, they're going to stay there longer. There's less opportunities that then open up for the young guns, as you said, to come in and fill the work ranks. And certainly in a country like ours, where we have a massive unemployment challenge, it is something to consider.
Well, it's interesting because that's in line with one of the tweets that we got from @Alskazo, who mentions that it will be a matter of experience versus innovation. But coming on to Lorna, she puts real pressure on the government, saying that the Department of Labour needs to force employees to get some kind of retirement benefit fund instead of leaving them to go by their ways. And then when they reach retirement, as you mentioned, now we have to issue a grant.
Yes, I agree with that. There's a couple of reasons why I think that's an excellent idea. And in fact, government is looking at that. The first one is, which you've mentioned, Gugu, if you have had the opportunity to work, but you never saved for retirement, you will end up dependent on government. That is almost in an unnecessary way. Yeah, and that's money government could be deploying elsewhere to tackle things like unemployment. The second thing is, as I said, we are also living longer. So we need to be saving for retirement. And one of the best ways to achieve retirement savings is through employers. And the reason why I say it's one of the best ways is that it's very disciplined. You know, you can't miss out a month of saving. Automatically, the employer puts in an amount, you automatically put in an amount, it's put into a fund, it's wisely invested, costs are pretty low. It's a very good situation to have retirement saving happen. And so I think it is a good plan to look at ways, practical ways, where we can say, let's have a system where actually every employer is involving their employees in some kind of retirement fund. You know, currently government estimates that from the working population, there are about 6 million people who are not in a retirement fund at all.
6 million people, and then you have 12 million people on a grant.
Yeah, begins to add up.
Exactly. Anyway, thank you so much, Craig. It's no doubt interesting insights that we're gaining today. That was Craig Aitchison from Old Mutual Corporate.